Okay, so with that, why don't we get started? Quick introduction here. So we've got the guys from Badgerland Birding, and we'll let them kind of tell about what they do. But two brothers that are obviously into birds and do a quick tutorials slash educational. I don't know how would you describe your they're entertaining and really fun. I mean, and I learn a lot, even someone that's pretty experienced, and you break it down to a level that everybody can understand. So with that, go ahead and I don't know who's gonna present for you guys.
We got it split up a little bit. I like to describe it as edutainment, educational entertainment.
Yeah.
But we do videos where we go out and find birds. We do ID tip stuff. We do gear reviews. We do interviews. So kind of a little bit for everybody.
And we try to make it too as authentic as possible to our experience. So we try to just go out there and film what happened. And so anytime you watch one of them, you can be rest assured that it's very much what actually happened in the moment and not just whatever we thought would make a better story.
Is the presentation up on the screen?
It is.
Perfect. All right, so we're going to be talking a little bit about the seasons of birding we've had and what to also look forward to in the future, because I don't know about you guys, but for me, when winter starts rolling around, I'm like, man, the days are going to be shorter. It's going to be cold. It's kind of just like fall migration's winding down. It kind of gets negative, but we want to look at some of the positives and some of the things we can look forward to in our seasons of birding. So we're going to start off just by talking a little bit about how we got started doing what we do, our story, how we got into birding. We're going to do a summer recap of some of the highlights we've had. Then we'll move on to our fall migration, past, and kind of what we're moving into, as well as our winter migration, including some exciting stuff about the winter finch forecast, notable places to bird in the winter, and then some tips on how to get involved as well.
So we'll start out with just something that's basic, but I think is definitely worth defining, is what actually is birding. Because for most of our lives, actually, before we heard about it, we had no idea that it was actually a hobby that existed. So birding is the observation of birds in their natural habitats as a hobby. So that specific definition. And then what's interesting about the hobby is that there's various types of ways to get into it. So you can do it as a thing that you just do for fun. You can do it with the idea of having some art out of it and making some pictures out of photography or videography. It's very relaxing. And then also there's the listing competitive side of it. So this was kind of our first intro as to what it was and what kind of sparked us to get involved with it. And if Derek, you want to move ahead to the next slide. How did we get into birding, which is similar to the way that most people probably got into birding. Was at first we noticed the backyard species such as the cardinals, such as the robins, and we had kind of a base knowledge of that stuff and what it was. We learned about a lot of it from our parents. And one thing that really stuck out to me personally was we would go to our grandparents' house and they had a big window in the backyard and they would have a bird feeder up. And so you'd always see, the juncos during winter and the cardinals and the goldfinches. But then every once in a while, they would get this bird that was kind of unique to the yard, and it was the red-breasted nuthatch. So it was like whenever we saw the nuthatch, we would get excited about it because it was such a different thing for the yard. And I feel like that kind of, for me personally, at least sparked that idea of birding as there's something rare out there that you may want to go find. And then a big thing for us that really turned it for us, or I guess exposed us to the world of birding, is what I'm sure most people also experienced, was the Big Year movie. And for those of you that haven't seen it, I'm assuming a lot of you have. It's a comedy, a heartfelt comedy, I would say. It has Jack Black, Steve Martin, and Owen Wilson in it. And so the way that this worked is they are all competing to see who can see the most birds in a single calendar year across North America. So they go through all these adventures and personal growth and go to all these unique places. And I remember Derek and I were at our parents' house and we were sitting in the living room. And my mom just calls me out of the room. She's like, "There's a movie about birds on. Do you guys want to watch it?" And we're just like, "Yeah, sure, let's watch it." And then seeing that that was actually a thing people did and cared about, was seeing birds and going out to find them in these unique places, it just really resonated with us because we already liked nature. We already liked birds a little bit, at least we knew about some of them, but we wanted to learn more about the hobby and about how to get involved in that.
Yeah, and I feel like when you're young, like I remember we'd be out fishing and we'd be like, "Oh, cool, like a Baltimore Oriole, like that's not normally here." And you notice these cool things, but like now being into it more, you kind of like, "Oh, it's the season for Orioles. Like, of course they're gonna be here." So it kind of like is cool to see the knowledge you gain as you learn about it, and you see other people get to that too. It's just like, "Oh, I had this cool orange bird in my yard," where you kind of see them kind of rising the ranks of being more interested in birds and birding as well, kind of as they get more into it.
And I feel like it used to be kind of like a mystical thing too, like, oh, there's an Oriole here now. Why is that here? Oh, a rose-breasted grosbeak. I haven't seen that on the trail before. Or one thing too is we would look through our little Stan Tequila Birds of Wisconsin guide and look at birds we wanted to see. And one was, I distinctly remember this, an American coot. And we're just like, I've never seen that before. Imagine how cool that would be to see. Because we were just not in marshy areas where they lived. And then now looking back at it, we're like, we could have gone to any one of these marshy places and seen tons of American coots. So it's just kind of funny that knowledge that we gained. But then we decided to create Badgerland Birding, which is our YouTube channel that we have now. And the kind of breadth of what all of the things that we do falls under. So it started in 2016, and the way it started was we were just going out and birding and having fun with it. And we were like, it would really be cool if we could keep track of some of these experiences and showcase some of what we experience for other people, because we found birding to be this cool adventure where we were going out to these different places and trying to find a needle in a haystack type of bird that other people had already found or that's supposed to be in the area. And we realized there wasn't a lot of media out there promoting how cool and fun birding actually was. So the first thing we tried to do was go out and film our adventure trying to find a king eider on the Milwaukee coastline in Lake Michigan. So it's definitely our worst video we've ever made, in my opinion, but it really started out us wanting to do that more because it was fun to edit and put together and provide information on the species we saw. So it was a very rough video, but it started it. And then we kind of started doing more of them, and it started growing and growing, and more people were interested. And now it has 26,000 subscribers, over 200,000 hours of watch time, and 4 million views. So we're really happy with how it's grown and that we can reach people in all sorts of different states and countries, and that they even care about the birds that we're seeing and what we're up to.
Yeah, and it's definitely been neat to see the growth over time, because it's definitely the kind of thing where like it was growing, but it was growing pretty slowly. So if it was the kind of thing we didn't really enjoy doing, we probably would have stopped doing it a long time ago. But since we really enjoyed putting everything together and going out and filming, and people seem to be resonating with it enough, it gave it enough time to kind of grow and reach different audiences. And I think one of the appeals that it has over other things is um it's very not like over your head information. Like I feel like sometimes new birders just get super overwhelmed, or they feel like sometimes people are being demeaning to them because even just like the language they use, if they're talking about like, lures or something that's kind of complicated. So we really try to explain it so it's accessible to everybody, especially those that are just starting out, because those are the people that we need to get excited about birding, learn more about conservation, and really help kind of push some of these causes forward in the bird world.
Yeah, but what's nice about birding too is as our channel has grown, fortunately, the hobby seems like it's grown as well. And there are a lot of reasons for that. And one of them is the fact that as time has gone on, things have started to cost more, whereas birding for the most part is still relatively low cost. And sure, there are costs associated with it. So, there's the tank of gas that you're spending to go somewhere, or if you're really into it, you're going to South Texas and California like we are, there's flights and hotels and things like that. But you can just look out your window and look at the birds, and technically you're birding, or take a hike somewhere and technically you're birding. So it's really open for anybody to get into, no matter what their budget is. And then also it allows you to be active and healthy too. So a recent study, or many recent studies, have shown that birding is something that people are doing to try to stay healthy and stay well. It engages the mind too. So there are a lot of actual health benefits to it, in addition to just the fact that it doesn't cost very much. Some other reasons too it's growing is it's community based. I mean, you have the bird clubs, and then you also have the different Facebook groups. You have just friends that go out and go birding. So it's not something you just do solo, which I think also helps. And then, as I mentioned earlier, it's a very dynamic thing. So you can be competitive with it. You can take pictures and be creative with it. You can just relax while you do it. So it's really whatever you want it to be, which I think is really helpful and why the hobby's starting to grow. And what's interesting is that sources, you can see the responsibletraveler.org has stated that bird watching is reported as being the fastest growing outdoor activity in America, which is kind of wild to think about all the different activities that bird watching or birding is growing. And I think we're seeing that because now when we go out, there's a lot more people looking for the same species than there were before.
Yeah, and actually birding is super big in certain places in Europe, like the UK. Apparently birding is super big. So I think there's definitely room for it to grow in America as well, even though it's grown a little bit. I think there's a lot of room for it to grow even further. And we also saw the rise of people birding from COVID because they couldn't really go out and do anything. So they're like, oh, I'll try this bird watching thing. And it got a lot of people hooked into it. And it was cool to see those people getting excited about birding. I remember Ryan and I were at Horicon Marsh, and we met this guy who was like a COVID birder, and he was super excited about seeing this black crown night hare, and he like saw it, and then he like ran to like give his fiance a hug and be like, I saw the night hare. And so it was cool to see that enthusiasm spread. And I'm curious to see how many of those birders that got started during COVID continue to kind of grow, or if they're kind of, you know, going to fall off at some point. It seems like they've kind of gotten assimilated into the birding world. But that definitely, you know, kind of increased people's awareness of birds and birding.
Yeah, and then there were some other things that we noticed as we started too. So when we began our birding journey, I think I was probably about like 21. Derek was probably like 17, 18 years old. So we were on the younger side in terms of birders. And I remember we went to this Swift's night out in Lake Geneva. So there's a presentation about American kestrels. Then you got to watch the chimney swifts funnel into the chimney. And I remember the guy that was giving a presentation or organizing it came up to us after and just kind of pulled us aside. And he just goes, I just want to thank you for being here. And we were like, oh, what do you mean? Like, there's nothing special about us. We just came here. He's like, I want to thank you for being young and being interested in birding, which we thought was funny. But we have a lot of other friends that are young too, and they say that they get some of those comments too. And if you look at the pie chart, the percent of away from home wildlife watchers by age at the time that this happened was very much on the older side. So looking at 65 and up, 55 and up, and 45 and up is making up over half of that pie chart. But we are seeing that now it's starting to shift more toward younger people getting into it, is being seen more as a hobby that everyone's doing, not just an older generation. Because I'm sure that a lot of people have fought the stereotype of, oh, you're into birding, you must be retired or you must be on the older side or something. That's not really the case. And some of the other things that we learned through birding, Derek, you probably want to tell the story about trying to go out and see finches in the Kettle Moraine State Forest. Yeah.
Sure, I got a train behind me, so I'm not sure how much you can hear
Oh,
that.
gotcha. Well, I can certainly go for it then. So we learned a lot of stuff about birding. One of the first experiences we had was we wanted to go out and find all sorts of rare birds in the South Kettle Moraine State Forest. So at this point, we didn't know that birds were habitat dependent. We didn't know you had to go to specific places to see them or specific places in the state. So we would look at our bird book and we would be like, oh, evening grosbeak looks like it lives in Wisconsin. I bet we can go out to the forest and see them. And that was kind of a thing like, let's go to the forest and we'll find some birds there. So we went to the Kettle Moraine State Forest. We found, some chickadees and I think some goldfinches. We're like, where are all these birds that are supposed to be here? So we learned that birds live in places depending on their species and their habitat and their range. And so that was a big thing for us that got us started. But we also learned that there's a ton of different ways to get involved in birding. So there's Christmas bird counts, breeding bird atlas. You can be a competitive lister. You can take pictures, and all of that stuff really makes up an interesting hobby altogether that we discovered. And that's kind of how we got into this whole thing and do what we do now.
Yeah, and when we started too, it was tough because we didn't really know what was rare and what wasn't. So like basically as the year went on, we kind of decided we were going to try to do like a big year in Wisconsin type thing. And as new things were reported, we'd be like, oh, we need to go see that like as quick as possible. So like during the winter, I think a pied-billed grebe got reported. It's like, we got to run out and try to see that when like there's going to be a bunch later. We just didn't really have that knowledge at that time. But it kind of made it fun to just kind of see as much as we could and just kind of be excited about it as we went along. So I also remember like when it was like our first year, people were like, oh, enjoy the first year because everything's new and it's really exciting. But I still think everything's really exciting because there's so much to see. Like you're basically never going to run out of birds in the world that you can try and see. We're friends with Arjen Dwarshuis, the guy who has the global big year record, and there's still species that he wants to see. Like we went out with him and got his lifer Montezuma quail. So like even people that have been all over the world still have birds that they're looking for and still get excited about it. So that's another reason why it's great. And also people like, it gets people into other hobbies. I remember our friend Bill, he was really into birds and then he got really into moths for a little bit. So it kind of pushes you into the just learning about ecology in your environment too. And the more you look at birds, the more you're going to notice the trees and the plants and the butterflies and the flowers. So it's kind of like, can also be kind of a gateway to learning about other natural things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember one other story that Derek likes to tell too is that first year we were birding. A lot of the stuff was, new for us. So we were on the Fox River in Waukesha, and we were just, seeing if there were any interesting ducks there. And we saw this crazy duck that was white and black and had a big spot on its cheek and a bright yellow eye. And we looked it up in the book. We're like, common golden eye. We'd never seen one of those before. So, obviously now we've seen thousands and thousands of common golden eye, but at the time it was this cool special thing that we had never seen before. And it's really neat to have those kind of experiences with birding. And we still have those experiences, but now it's, when we travel somewhere else, or sometimes if a rare bird gets reported here, which we'll talk about some of those in a minute, actually, about those interesting experiences this year. But now we're going to start going into some of the summer recap stuff. And one thing that's interesting about birding is that the seasons are all different. So you can go through a summertime and have stuff already starting to move around in terms of migration while other things are breeding. But I know for me, when I was a kid, it was like, oh, it's winter, it's fall, it's spring, it's summer. And now it's like, oh, it's fall sparrow season. Oh, it's the first migration of red-winged blackbird. So when you see all that stuff moving around, it really changes how the seasons look to you. And we were talking a little bit earlier about how, people love spring, but personally, I absolutely love the fall and the winter birding scene for a lot of reasons that we'll get into a little bit later. Did you have anything that you wanted to add, Derek? Because we were talking about the South too. I was not just in the North where the seasons change.
Yeah, so I actually got my master's in marine biology in Louisiana. And when I moved down there, I met a guy named Eric Johnson who works for Louisiana Audubon. And I was talking to him about how like I missed the seasons. And I was like, don't you kind of miss having like all 4 seasons down here? Because it's hot in the summer and buggy, and then it gets pretty nice weather in the winter, but like that's about it. It's kind of like you get this hot weather or this like kind of cold, humid type weather. And he was like, well, the birds are my season. There's like a winter hummingbird season, and then there's like, waterfowl migration. So like his calendar was kind of these different birding seasons as opposed to just like, oh, it's fall, winter, spring, or summer. And so if you kind of abide with that here in Wisconsin too, it really breaks it up into a lot of different categories to be excited about. So even those birders in the South, they have a little bit of something all year, and it's not just kind of like your 4 standard seasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to move on to talk a little bit about some of the craziness that happened this year in the state, and especially in the summer. And before that, even, I do have to mention the craziness that was the flame-colored tanager that was in Milwaukee too.
Yeah.
So talking about some, crazy things that you just look at and you're like, wow, that is a weird thing to have here. That kind of started out the year in the springtime like that. But Derek, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's been strange in Wisconsin this summer and early fall?
Lately, I've been referring to it as the Wisconsin Glades because it feels like we're the Everglades of the North. We have limpkin all over the place. There was the roseate spoonbill that came up. We had American flamingos here. And then we also had like some white ibises. It's just been kind of a crazy year for rare birds, especially those that you might expect to see in Florida or just kind of the South. And so to start off, we have a lot of these different birds, but there's different reasons that they're showing up in the state. For example, the limpkins, they're actually showing up because their food source, the apple snails, have been expanding as well. And so as these apple snails that have been kind of relegated to Florida move into other areas like Louisiana and Texas, the limpkin have also been kind of following because they're very dependent on large snails and mussels as a food source. And so this is a bird that actually seems to be having a range expansion, and they may be seen on a yearly basis now, kind of as they move up and come back down. And so with those apple snails, it's important to note they're not in Wisconsin. I think they're pretty sensitive to temperature differences. So I don't know if they could ever actually move up into the state, but we do have some other non-native large snails like the Chinese and Japanese mystery snail. And limpkin will also eat mussels and other snails, but kind of that apple snail movement has then kind of pushed them into other areas, even if the apple snails aren't necessarily there yet. So this is a bunch of apple snail shells. So if there is a limpkin around, you'll see a lot of shell piles. And on the right is actually the apple snail eggs, which look like these weird pink masses. And sometimes they'll say that you should like, scrape them off. They're like a weird gelatinous, but like crunchy at the same time consistency. But if you're ever in the South and you see those eggs, those are apple snails. They'll be absolutely everywhere. But with the limpkin,
before you move too far from that, limpkin are very odd birds in and of themselves too. So they look like they would be herons, but they're actually closely related to rails more than almost anything else. And then that bill is actually twisted and curved so they can reach into these snail shells and pull the snail out. So also they're named after, not after anything, but they're named because people that first viewed them thought that their weird gait made them look like they were limping. So just what a strange animal, and what a weird bird to have up here.
you just had to throw shade at the limpkin, huh?
Yeah, I mean, if it looks like it limps, you got to talk about it.
I do know people have gotten annoyed because they make this like screaming kind of like wailing, and sometimes it'll keep people up at night. So that's something to watch out for in the future if they do become common. Sometimes people are kind of actually annoyed because of how noisy they are. And then this was limpkins through 2018. So you can see they're mostly relegated to Florida. Like that was the thing, is you pretty much had to go to Florida to see a limpkin. And now we look through 2023, like it's just a boom, like limpkin all over the place. And I think in like near the Bayfield area, they found a roadkill limpkin, which was sad, but that was like one of the most northerly records. So it'll be interesting to see where these limpkin will all go, and if they'll kind of, do this on a yearly basis. I imagine they would. I don't see any reason why they would suddenly then just go back to Florida.
Yeah,
but
I think they will as well, but that's an incredible explosion there, because I mean they
I
did
know, look at this thing.
like a Florida specialty species, and that's why when the first one was reported up here, I believe it was that one that was in Racine that was actually in a private residence that some people got to see, but it was just a crazy thing that I think there was one too somewhere north there that year that people sometimes had to take like a canoe or a kayak to go out and see. But yeah, it was a big deal. I'm sure a lot of you remember that when they started to get reported here last year, and this year they've just been continuing, and I do think that that's going to be a thread that we see in the next couple of years with them expanding.
Yeah, and the other bird to keep an eye out for, not so much in Wisconsin, but in states close to Florida, is the snail kite, because they also rely heavily on apple snails. So especially in Louisiana, people have kind of been waiting. We're like, hey, the limpkin are here. When are the snail kites going to move in? So that's another bird we might see move because of the apple snail increase. I don't think they'll make it as far north, but they may start moving as well. Next up, we had the roseate spoonbill that showed up in the Green Bay area, which was super cool. That seemed like more it was just a vagrant bird, so it was kind of out of its range. But with the fall, I also wanted to talk about their pink color. So with the flamingos and the spoonbills, they get their color from their diet, from something called the carotenoids in the food that they eat. And that also kind of ties in with fall too, because that's why we see the fall color as the leaves change. So the leaves have carotenoids in them and chlorophyll. The chlorophyll gives it the green color. The carotenoids are kind of the, reds, yellows, and oranges. And as they lose their chlorophyll, you start to see those other colors. And so carotenoids are the reason we get the leaf color change in the fall, and why we get pink spoonbills and flamingos. And this spoonbill seemed like it was kind of a one-off, just like a vagrant bird. But then we had the flamingo madness in the east, which was a totally different cause, which was caused by Hurricane Idalia. So as that hurricane came in and hit the Gulf and moved up, it pushed all these flamingos into the east. They've been moving around all over the place. It made, national news, which has also been something cool to see non-birders get excited about birding because of the flamingos, which is a great spark bird. So they've been all over the east. Something sad is they've actually had 2 of the birds die because of snapping turtles, which is not something I really ever thought, would be an issue. But I guess, these birds aren't really used to waiting in areas with a lot of predaceous turtles, I suppose. But it's curious to see where they'll end up next.
Yeah, absolutely. And Derek and I had very different experiences viewing the flamingos. So for him, it was, I'm sure everyone remembers the day they showed up on Lake Michigan in Ozaukee County because notifications went far and wide that they were there. And even the national news, I think, was there too. And there were stories that popped up about them. So Derek gets to go to the beach, you know, view some flamingos. Very good. I had to work, which was very unfortunate. So I did not get out there that day. But unfortunately, they were relocated later at Pentwell Lake. So we actually have a video about this that we made, but me and our friend Nathaniel met up with our other friends, Rob and Eric, and took some kayaks out to get views of these flamingos that otherwise were basically not viewable from the shoreline. That was a really unique experience. We were just out in the middle of this lake in a kayak viewing these flamingos from a distance away. And going back to Derek calling it the Wisconsin Glades, it really did feel like the most Everglades experience I've ever had without actually going to the Everglades.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but for me, it really made me question my sanity. I'm like, am I in Wisconsin? I'm like, this is a beach with flamingos on it. It just felt so out of place.
Yeah, and what else felt weird too was that I had just went to the Milwaukee County Zoo a couple weeks earlier. So I was like, I just saw these from like 2 feet away. And I'm like, now I'm seeing them in the wild. And it still hasn't computed. So the flame colored tanager that we saw, I was like, wow, wasn't that cool? The flamingos, I was just like, well, that was weird. It doesn't even feel real.
Yeah, for sure. And here's our map of where flamingos have been seen so far. So this is still an evolving situation too. Some interesting things is like Georgia and Mississippi have been left out at the moment. But I'm sure they've been there and probably just not, documented to the degree of considering it a concise sighting. But we do hold the most northerly record at the time. And I would assume the birds that were here ended up going south somewhere. So that may be like the most northerly flamingo record we ever get. And as we were talking about the different causes for birds moving around, this is one that, we're probably not going to see happen anytime soon if I was placing a bet on it. So glad a lot of people in the state got to appreciate the flamingos. Hopefully other people will appreciate them as well, and they'll kind of funnel back down to their proper location.
Yeah, absolutely. And now we'll get into a little bit of the actual migration that's happening right now and not the weather-driven, hurricane-driven stuff that the flamingos went through. But let's talk a little bit about fall migration. And I don't know about you, Derek, but fall migration is one of my favorite parts of the year, actually. I love spring, don't get me wrong, but after summer is going and it's hot and buggy and stuff is nesting, I love to see those first birds start to trickle down. So we're going to get into a little bit of what you can be excited for in fall. And I know we are pretty much like halfway through it, probably with part of October and November left to go, but there's still a lot of stuff to be excited about during this time of the year.
So you telling me you're a big drab warbler guy?
I love drab warblers. I think that when they're in spring plumage, it's too flashy. So I wish they would calm down a little bit.
All right. So kind of earlier in the year, we did have our warbler migration. I definitely noticed a difference in the number of birders out and about because in spring it's just packed with people, and then in fall you'll see like one brave soul looking at like yellow rumped warblers or something. But I thought it was actually a pretty good fall migration along the Milwaukee lakefront. And I do think it's easier to find certain species like Cape May warblers in the fall. They just seem like they come down in greater numbers. You also get to appreciate those thrushes like the Swainsons and the gray cheeks. And then I kind of consider it like yellow-bellied flycatcher season because we had a good push of them as well. And then you also get to kind of look for some of those secretive sparrows like the Nelsons and LeContes. And Ryan and I have had some experiences walking through grass and thickets, getting all the like pricker bush stuff on your legs and, getting wet feet looking for those birds. So that's an adventure in itself. But this is kind of like, early fall kind of sparrows are still happening now, but
Yeah, those
some of
Nelsons and
the
Lacan
past.
sparrows are birds that you usually have to really want to go find. I mean, they do show up from time to time on like the lake shore, and if you walk the tall grasses, you can find them and flush them. But if you really want those, you kind of have to wade into some areas that you probably don't want to venture for any other reason other than that. I remember there was a year, it's Derek, what's that pond that they always get them at out in Evansville?
I don't remember the name of it.
Okay, well, there's that little lake out there. It's a pond out in Evansville, and the grass gets really tall. And we've gone in there with hip waders before to track them down in the smartweed. And I think it was Evansville State Wildlife Area that we had them most recently. People were reporting them there, and we did walk in there with our sweatpants on, or at least I had sweatpants on. And by the time that we were out, we actually got to look at both species. By the time I was out, whole legs were covered with different varieties of clinging plants. So That was one that you have to want sometimes to go get. And then also Harris's sparrows are out and about this time of year too. I think there were a bunch of reports in the last couple of weeks of those, but I always love seeing those with their big beefy bodies and those very nice looking markings on the chest and the cap, especially if it's a male in breeding.
Yeah, and as Jeff was mentioning, you also get, well, we've seen a ton of white-throated sparrows out in the yard, and not even just doing their full white-throated call, but they'll do like a high-pitched chip as well. So it's been kind of cool to learn that. And then of course, some of the stuff like juncos that come in.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another thing that's exciting is you get the return migration of the different waterfall types. So they also come on the way up, late February, early March, we get a big push of geese, and then the ducks kind of funnel in, some of them earlier, some of them later. But in fall, you can still look for the snow geese, the Ross's geese, cackling geese, all making their way down here. And then tundra swans will also be on their way down too. And some of the great places that we've had extremely good times with those have been like Goose Pond is good. Sometimes you get them in just flooded fields. But I remember in the spring migration, or I guess late winter, early spring migration, sometimes those are numbering in the thousands as they're coming up. So, white-fronted geese as well in that mix. And those are pretty spectacular sights to see. And then, of course, the ducks. I mean, Horicon Marsh especially is a great place to see some of these ducks on the way back down south. Some of the species to keep an eye out for are the northern shovelers, American widgeons, gadwalls, northern pintails in terms of the dabblers. But this is a great time of the year for that stuff to be moving through as well. And then some of the other waterfowl too to expect. You have the red-throated loons and the Pacific loons, something to look out for this time of the year. And then the grebes also, we get red-necked, eared, and western. And a lot of these species you can certainly find on the Lake Michigan coastline. And then you get the grebes too, chilling out in some of the interior ponds and some of the places that they've actually bred throughout the year. So like Schoenberg Marsh is one where the redneck grebes sometimes hang out, but Vernon Park too on Lake Michigan sometimes gets high numbers of these types of grebes, especially the redneck and sometimes the eared too, migrating through. So you can just see them on the rafts out in the middle of the lake if you wanted to use a scope to see those. So this is the time of the year when some of these birds that are migrating through are really good to go see. And then in addition to that, you have the birds that are going to stick for the summer or for the winter that start coming down too. So some of my favorite stuff to find is those ducks that are going to be the winter sea ducks. So talking about the scoters, all three species. Of course, one of the best looking birds that we're going to have in the winter is the long-tailed duck in its non-breeding plumage, actually. And then, of course, the buffleheads, common golden eyes, and mergansers, all things that are going to be around this time of year. So when I first start to see those buffleheads and common golden eyes, I get excited because I know that those other species are soon to follow or already here in the state.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to ask, Ryan, is how much do you feel like fall migration is a chance to redeem yourself on things you missed in the spring? Or do you feel like you try to do more in the spring and then for fall, you're just kind of like, I don't need to go out as much?
So that's an excellent question. So especially in the last couple of years when we've been traveling more, I feel like I haven't been focusing on my state list so much. And especially, like when there's a bunch going on in spring, and then summer's kind of the dead zone. Sometimes you start to not go birding as much. And then also you realize that you still need like black scoter for your state list that year. And that is a great time to go redeem yourself if you missed on it on the way up. Because like you mentioned, sometimes it feels like some of these species are actually easier to get in like October, November, and even December than they are in the springtime or maybe in the winter in January, February. So I think that it is a redemption time. I made a video about this where somehow I didn't have yellow-bellied sapsucker on my list and it was still like November or October. So I went out and got one of those. And then I think it was whippoorwill I still needed too. So we did do a video about that kind of redemption for that time of year. But fall is a great time to capture any of these species that you missed on the way up.
So additionally, there's a couple rare sea ducks to look out for. Harlequin ducks, Sheboygan's been, a knockout place to see those past couple years. Be on a lookout for those eiders if you're scoping off the lakefront, and of course, Barrow's goldeneye. So with all those flocks of common goldeneye, it's great to pick through and try to find a Barrow's if you're into that kind of thing. I think it takes a special kind of person to pick through everything that's the same, look for the oddball out. It's kind of like those books you would do as a kid where it's like, can you find like this one, these things in this picture? there's
Like
definitely
a Where's Waldo.
elements. Yeah, like a Where's Waldo. I know we had the tufted duck, that's another one to look out for as well, kind of as we get into this time. But there's definitely something special about just taking a scope to the lake and looking through all the waterfowl when it's chilly. You're in a sweatshirt and a big coat and just enjoying kind of the seabirds moving down into this area.
Yeah, we have a sad story about Barrow's goldeneye though. There was either one or two that were hanging out in Sheboygan a number of years ago, and we were gonna go see it. We had just gotten back from vacation. I think they'd been there like a week or two, and so we're gonna go take a trip up there. Before we leave, Derek's like, "Hold on, I'm a little hungry, so I think I'm gonna have a bowl of cereal." So he takes his time eating. Like, of course, they'll still be there. It took like 15 minutes to get on the road then, and we get there, and one of our friends is like, "It just flew away. You missed it by like 1 or 2 minutes, and it's probably not coming back. That thing is headed west or northwest or whatever is going." And I think that was our biggest "you just missed it by that much" moment, probably in our birding 10 years so far.
Yeah, unfortunately, I feel like you get a bunch of reminders that you need to leave as soon as you can if you're going to look for something rare. Um, that's probably like one of the biggest things I learned is, once something rare is reported, you try to go as soon as possible and you don't, kind of take your time doing other things. It was very much like the pink-footed goose the first time in the big year, where he's like, that thing's headed way out there. Sorry, boys, you just missed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what a cool bird the harlequin duck is. I mean, I think that's one of my favorite ducks. And I remember the first time I saw one, it was in Sheboygan and it was a female. And I spent like all day looking for it. And then it was just chilling by a rock. But what an incredible looking species that comes down here and actually will spend some time in the Great Lakes. We've had those two that have lived in Sheboygan for seemingly over a year now. It probably has been over a year. So I saw one reported again in Sheboygan. So hopefully that they'll stick the winter time. But really exciting to have some of these sea ducks coming down because they are a treat to go see.
And we've had good luck with the male harlequins being around too, because when they have that full plumage, it's spectacular.
Yeah. So let's move on to winter migration. And I don't know if I'm alone in this, but I absolutely love winter birding season. And part of it's because there's no bugs to deal with. Part of it's because you can really focus on a set number of species. But there's just something cool about the birds that actually come down to winter in Wisconsin, which is still quite cold. So I just feel like these birds are some of the most hardcore species that we see. Just the fact that there's no insects there isn't going to stop them from thriving. They're going to endure the conditions in the snow and the cold. And I just think that's really cool. But what's cool about the winter too is that you're going to start noticing those changes pretty early at your bird feeder. So the dark-eyed junco is one that's typically the snowbird of the Midwest. So they'll be one of the first species to arrive that people kind of think is signaling that winter is coming. And it seems like people have been totally baffled in a lot of groups recently that juncos are here already, and they'll start coming down pretty early. And when you see that, you know that the colder weather is about to come through as well. But in addition to the juncos, you also have the American tree sparrow, which is one of the dominant sparrows during that time of the year when it's colder. You can always identify them by their rufous cap. Remember, it took a long time when we started birding to realize we had American tree sparrows in addition to the house sparrows that were at our family bird feeder. But then some other exciting species will stick around too. So fox sparrows, white-crowned sparrows, and white-throated all are more in the fall than the winter, but you'll have a handful that stick around too and can sometimes even be considered rare during the wintertime if you can find some. And then in addition to those types of birds with the sparrows, you also have the winter finches, which to me is extremely exciting to have those specialty types of finches that are eruptive. So look for the pine siskins. Jeff said that he already had a pine siskin at his feeder. So it could be a good year for those. And then common redpoll is one that, of course, is extremely eruptive. And I'm sure most people remember when we had that massive eruption a couple years ago, where if you had a bird feeder out, chances are you had a high number of common redpolls there, which that was a really exciting time, in my opinion, to see those birds that we don't usually get. And then mixed in with those common redpolls, you can also look for hoary redpolls, which are the more frosty, stubbier billed relative of the common redpoll that may not be a species much longer because they are looking at lumping those at some point. But I do believe as it stands right now, they are two separate species.
Yeah, I was talking to Matt Young from the Finch Research Network about this, and he was saying that after the paper kind of got put out saying they might be similar enough to be lumped, there was no like follow-up, because I think you have to actually submit something to be like, hey, we should lump these. I don't think anything's been done with that. So as of now, they're two separate species.
Yeah, for anybody that doesn't know, the hoary redpoll is much more rare in general, I would say, and certainly in Wisconsin than the common redpoll is, but a couple of them do get reported every year and they can be tough. Sometimes it's such a subtle difference that you have to just leave it as common slash hoary redpoll if you're going to e-bird it. But in addition to these species, there are also some more that I would say are on the more rare side that can come down. And some of those are pine grosbeak and the evening grosbeak, which pine grosbeaks you can sometimes find in the north woods. Very occasionally will come down a little more south, but if you cruise berry bushes or berry trees up there, or crabapple trees too, you can find pine grosbeaks. And then evening grosbeaks are a species that sometimes is on the move down too. We had kind of an eruption of them a few years ago, but by and large, you have to go to the north woods, and places like Alvin has been a popular destination for them.
We had him
Last year,
in, was it Rhinelander last year?
Rhinelander or Tomahawk up there
And
too. So
then Pine Grosbeak in Door County. So they can
yeah,
kind of trickle in a little further.
yeah, they will trickle in a little bit further. And then you have the two even more nomadic species, and the white-winged crossbill and the red crossbill, which you're going to see eating pine cones in various places. But Derek's going to talk a little bit now about the winter finch forecast highlights and what we can expect. And why don't you just say a little bit about what the winter finch forecast is too?
Sure. So the Winter Finchcast was something put together by Ron Pittaway, and he was a real finch master. And he would basically have these people go out, and he would go out, look at the cone crops in like the Canada area and the North Woods. And based on how the cone crops were looking, they were going to estimate if we were going to have a good or bad year for these birds. So based on how the crops look, if it was like a really good year, that means like certain species are probably going to stay north. If they didn't see a lot of crops, that means that those species would have to push south in order to find food. And unfortunately, Ron Pittaway passed away not that long ago. He was a great guy from everything I've heard, and it's sad that we lost him. But the Finch forecast was taken up by Tyler Hoare and Matt Young from the Finch Research Network. And Matt Young's the guy where if you have crossbill recordings, red crossbill, you can send them to him and he'll tell you what call type they are. So they're really into finches, and they kind of have been compiling the forecast since then. And we do an interview with him every year. So we always have the lowdown and all the winter finch stuff. And the big highlight this year was pine siskins. So Jeff said he already had one. It's looking like we could have a good push of pine siskins this year. So keep an eye on your finch feeders. If you have a bunch of goldfinches, there may be a pine siskin mixed in, or just big flocks of pine siskins. So that was kind of the big takeaway, is it kind of seemed like it could be hit or miss for all the other species, but pine siskins, there's possibly a good chance of a good push.
Yeah, that's definitely exciting. That's just a cool bird to kind of spot at your feeder amongst the goldfinches if you have goldfinches usually. So put out that finch seed and see if you can get some pine siskins.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, Rye, but like when there's a rare bird that comes to your feeder, it just, or like, you know, a rare winter finch, it just feels so special. Like I'm hosting like this cool like bird that needs food. I don't know, there's just something special about it.
Yeah, just something different. Like you said earlier, it's cool to pick out that Where's Waldo subtle difference, like, oh, hey, that one's a little bit off from what I'm used to. And then you find out it's something cool. I remember we experienced that with song sparrows in winter. We had a pine warbler that actually visited our family bird feeder for a winter too. So that's always fun to do that. And then in addition to those finches, there's some other eruptive species too that aren't in the finch family. So red-breasted nuthatch, are actually one of the earliest moving eruptive species. So they'll start moving really early in the fall and come down and enjoy pine stands somewhere near you, especially if it's a big year for them. Bohemian waxwings are a really fun species to see. You have to, again, stake out those berry bushes. They'll sometimes be with pine grosbeaks as well, but very, very neat bird to see. We saw probably, would you say thousands of them, at least hundreds of them when we were up in Tomahawk, I think it was.
Yeah, and that was
Them.
funny because there were like 2 cedar waxwings in there, and that was like exciting too. Like, oh look, there's 2 cedars mixed in. So it's like the reverse. You have a ton of the rare bird and then a few of the common one, but it was still fun.
Yeah. And what's kind of funny too is like these birds are more on the rare side. They're usually in Wisconsin at some point during the year. So a lot of the stuff that is rare isn't always rare for the region you find it in. So sometimes, you find pine grosbeaks. It's not necessarily rare for the area, but we certainly feel like it's rare and special because we don't get
All
those.
relative.
So it's all relative, yeah, which is interesting. And then blue jays actually have a movement too that's eruptive. So you can have a good year for blue jays too in the winter, or a bad year for blue jays, but they actually are migratory and movers, which I don't think we even think about sometimes.
Yeah, it was funny because I led a tour group the other day and they were like, "Are blue jays endangered? I feel like we used to see them all the time and we don't see them in our backyard anymore." And I was like, "No, they're good. They just like, they'll move around." And then we saw like a ton of blue jays when we were out, and by then they're like, "We're not worried about blue jays anymore." So it is good to keep in mind that they do have those big flights and they're not, just kind of a static, stay in the same place species.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we're going to go over some of the other types of birds that you can find and some of the places to find them too. So every winter we take a couple at least of road trips where, and by road trip, I don't mean we're going to a destination other than we're going to a field somewhere that has some of the plow marks on the side, because there are a set of species in the fall and winter that you can find just cruising the road. And that's really the best place to find them. So as the plows scrape the road, they also scrape the side, which turns over the grass, which enables the birds to find food in these areas that aren't covered in ice and snow anymore. So if you see a bird on the side of the road that flushes into the bushes, you're probably looking for an American tree sparrow, a dark-eyed junco, or if you're lucky in the winter, a song sparrow. I know they're everywhere in the rest of the year, but during winter, they're kind of rare. And then you can also get meadowlarks that flush too during the winter time along the roadsides. You can get eastern and you can get western. But then if you have birds that will just go further into the field, you're probably looking at either horned larks and then Lapland longspurs and snow buntings. And both of those species, I would say, are winter specialty species for us in Wisconsin, and especially snow buntings, I find to just be so cool. But they'll be along the side of the road and they'll also be in the field too, picking at manure a lot of times. So if you find a field that has just had fresh manure put onto it, or places where those plow marks are running deep in the road, that's a great place to cruise and try to find some of these birds. And then some other stuff that you can cruise for from the road too are these open field raptors that are way more prominent in winter than any other time of the year in the state. So rough-legged hawks are not terribly uncommon. You can find them in open fields. Buena Vista grasslands is a great place for them. And then golden eagles is a species that I always found to be really cool. And especially if you drive Grant County, kind of the southwestern part of the state, and you look out over the bluffs, you can find golden eagles soaring. And there are certain people that do golden eagle surveys too, and they go through a certain route and count how many that there are. But that was a species I was very surprised that you were able to find in the state any time of the year. So
Yeah,
we've had
and
a couple of adventures trying to find those.
there's been a pair hanging out in Sauk County, kind of by Devil's Lake area too. So, and they've been there like the last couple of years. So that's one to keep an eye out to if you want a golden eagle a little closer to home.
Yeah, it's funny too because we've been birding for a while now, and it still feels really special to me that certain birds are just more accessible in the winter time than any other kind of year. Because I feel like you usually, if you don't know much about the migration, you think of like winter as just desolate and there's less around. And that to a degree is true, but there's also just different stuff around, which I think makes that time of the year really special. At least to me, that's how I always felt.
Yeah, it's those birding seasons you got to take advantage of.
Yeah, and how can we not talk about winter without talking about the different owls that could potentially make it into the state? So a big one, of course, is the snowy owl, which we were shocked to live in Wisconsin when we first started birding, because we were like, wouldn't it be special to see one of those and just so cool if you could take a trip to the high Arctic and see them. And I remember when we started birding, there was a report of one at an airport in Waukesha, and we actually went and got to see the snowy owl at the airport in Waukesha, and that's a big time spark bird for some people, probably a lot of people. When you're able to see one of those, you want to see more. But for us, it only furthered our love for birding. And snowy owls are actually eruptive in a way too, but different than the winter finches are. So snowy owls will have eruption years if the year prior there was a really good population of lemming or some other type of food for them. So more food means that they can raise more young, or more young survive. If more young survive, that means there's just more snowy owls in general, so they'll expand farther in search of territory. If it was a poor year, for lemmings and voles and things like that the year before, less snowy owls will make it, so less will come down. So whereas the winter finches are pushed in search of food, the snowy owl eruption is really a byproduct of having more food the year prior, which I always thought was interesting. And Ryan Brady actually usually does some sort of snowy owl forecast about what's being seen early in the year. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Derek?
No, just in addition, keep an eye out for great grays, way in the far north, probably. Short-eared owls are always fun to go find, soaring over open fields in certain areas, and then, keep an eye out for other rare stuff like northern hawk owls. Some of the stuff is getting where you can't even search it in eBird anymore, unfortunately, because, sometimes people are disrespectful at certain places, or they're just worried about those species. So they're kind of getting harder to find. which is unfortunate, but hopefully, it benefits the birds.
Yeah, one story that I like to tell people that was shocking to us was we were going to see a northern hawk owl on the first of the year that was in Eau Claire, and some of you might remember that bird because a lot of people went to go see it. I think it was probably like somewhere between 4 and 6 years ago. They named it Lars because on Lars Road in Eau Claire. But we were just watching it on the first of the year. The snow was falling down. It was nice and peaceful. It was sitting on top of a pine tree. And a falconer guy shows up and he has the glove and he has a mouse in his hand. And he just holds his hand up and the owl flies onto his hand. And that's one of the big problems with some of these species is they're not really used to seeing humans or very afraid of humans, so they're easy for falconers to capture. So it's one of the reasons that they won't allow their coordinates to be shared very much anymore, is because somebody could come and try to actually take the bird. Or as Derek said, people will harass the bird as well, trying to get photos, trying to bait them to get different photos. So it's kind of sad, but great gray owls, northern hawk owls, and well, not really boreal owls, those are just super rare in general, but great grays and northern hawk owls will not be shared very much anymore. But there are places you can go to still see them. The Saxon Bog is an excellent place. If you haven't gone there ever and you're good with withstanding cold, I would highly recommend it. And then snowy owls and short-eared owls will be on those more open landscapes. So along Lake Michigan, you can find snowy owls in open fields, such as the Freedom area. You can find snowy owls, and then short-eared owls. Kill Snake is a great place for them up in Calumet County, and then also Paradise Valley and Waukesha County if you want to see those birds as well. And then how could we talk about winter without talking about the gull migration? So in the summer, we obviously get some rare species such as the laughing gulls and the Franklin's gulls, but wintertime is such a good time for gulls. I mean, you have the great black-backed gull, which is the biggest gull species in the world, the lesser black-backed gull, Iceland and Glaucus. And I know a lot of people don't like gulling because it can be confusing with their different plumages, if they're sub-adult or first year, second cycle. There's so many different things that they can be, but it can also be super rewarding when you start to learn the different types of gulls and their field marks and how to differentiate them. So I think gulls are a little taboo, Derek, don't you think?
They can definitely be intimidating, but I think we have the benefit here in Wisconsin of having some that just look completely different. Like great black-backed gulls are huge and super dark. Like Glaucus, you can find the ones that are just pure white. So there are some ones that are a little easier to identify. Like we don't have to deal with Thayer's gulls anymore. So that's kind of nice, even though people will identify like Thayer's gulls. But it's definitely like you have to be a certain type of person to really like picking through gulls, but it can be super rewarding as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, wait, there's more. So if you go to the next slide, Derek, there are a couple of even more rare gull species that you can find in the winter. So keep an eye out for California gulls. They'll pop in and out all year. They're very tough to identify, but they live in the state. And then slaty-backed gulls is a gull species that we've normally found most in the winter, which I think is like a code 3 or 4 rarity actually, but they'll pop up along with some of the other species. And funny enough, one of the best places to find them is actually the landfill in Johnson Creek. So that's always a place that's worth a trip in the wintertime if you're okay with doing that. And I remember when we first started birding, I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to go to a landfill. And it was like a very short while later that I was like, a gull got reported at the landfill. I want to see, I guess I'll go. So yeah, birding, it does stuff to you. But then there are also a couple of other rare birds to watch for too that we've had some really fun experiences with. So the varied thrush, in my opinion, has to be one of the most beautiful birds in North America. And they will show up sometimes with people's bird feeders or berry bushes in the wintertime. And then Townsend solitaire is also such a cool species. They love to eat junipers. You can usually get 1 or 2 at Devil's Lake each year. But if you look at both of these species, the range map, there's a little dotted line of migration in the winter time. So both of these birds you can try to find in that time of the year, which is very exciting to me.
Definitely. Now, just to highlight some of those notable places to go in winter, that if you want to have a good time looking for birds, lakefront is always really cool, especially with when those huge ducks and scoters congregate. The roadsides, look for those specialties. The northern boreal forest, especially if we're having a good eruptive year. Western Wisconsin, you can check out those golden eagles, and of course the dump. So those are some good options for some winter birding destinations. If you haven't been to one of these, might be worth taking a trip out there. Of course, be safe in the winter conditions, but those are definitely some good places to go.
Yeah.
I wanted to add a little bit about how to get involved as well. So this is not so much about the winter birding, but it does have to do with fall migration. on October 5th, we had a huge flight of birds, and there was this building in Chicago called McCormick Place. That's a convention center. They apparently don't turn their lights off at night. So like nearly 1,000 birds were killed just by this one building in like a single morning. And so there's this Audubon petition that you can sign to get them to turn their lights off. Apparently they've been told multiple times and they just refuse to do it. And if you look it up, it's just this huge glass building. So it kind of makes sense, you know, why it would do this. And if they just took some simple actions, we could fix it. So they're trying to get to 10,000 people to sign this. If you go to our YouTube channel, we have a video about it with a link to the petition that you can sign if you would like. But, you know, it's just kind of sad that I feel like a lot of this stuff can be avoided if we all work together on it. And, you know, we should get these people to turn their lights off. So that's one thing you can do to get involved. Another more fun one is joining Project Feeder Watch, which starts November 1st. And basically you can sign up and you can count birds in your backyard, and they use that data to kind of do like species estimates and other citizen science type stuff. So that's really fun. Our mom likes to do Project Feeder Watch. I think they send you like a poster with the common backyard birds too. You can help collect data for science, as well as get involved with the Christmas bird count, which is always kind of a birding favorite to do as well. So petition, Project Feeder Watch, CBC are all some good ways to get involved with birding in the winter. Additionally, just some updates on what we're doing. I'm going to be guiding at the Rio Grande Valley Birding Festival next month. So if anyone's there, make sure to stop and say hi. We also have some new merchandise. I've been designing shirts. So we got some Puffin Party ones from when we were out in Oregon. And I've designed like some Flamingo Fest stuff. And there's like a bunch of other designs if you're interested. And we've also been doing presentations at the Conservancy for Healing and Heritage in Franklin. We just had our Owl Prowl presentation on Tuesday. It was a really good group. I think we had like 36 people come in, and we talked about owls, and then we went out to see what we could find. We tried at the Conservancy. We didn't have anything there, but we went down the road and we did have a great horned owl calling. So for those that stayed around for that, that was a cool experience for them to just hear one calling up a storm. So that was really neat. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm trying something new. This is a QR code. So if you have your phone on your camera mode, you can just put it up to that and it should take you to a link to our YouTube channel. If not, you can just find us by searching Badgerland Birding. So thanks so much for listening, and we'll take any questions that you guys have.
Any questions from the audience? I was talking about the flamingos. We did make it to Port Washington to see them at the beach there. It was, you know, it came across the wire and like, that's weird. Let's go see it. We drove over there and we're, you know, going to pull in by the South Shore beach, and the police have it blocked off. I thought, oh my God, you know, did something happen? You know, did somebody get hurt? You know, it's, you know, and it was just the people were just walking this, you know, kids out of school, they were running down there to see the flamingos, which is, like you said, you know, it's going to be somebody's spark bird here you know, coming up. And, you know, there were, you know, probably a couple hundred people there on the beach when we were there. And it was just, yeah, I was like, there's flamingos right here, and there's all kinds of people just looking at them. So it was really bizarre.
Yeah, it was a weird mix because you had like all the birders, and then you had like families with dogs running around, and there's like boats in the water. It's just this mix of like all these different people there for different reasons. But it all seemed like it worked out. Like, as far as I know, they just kind of left on their own, and then, you know, they were found later.
Yeah, we were actually there and saw them fly off. So, well, the last folks to see them in Port Washington there. So, yeah, that was.
Yeah, I didn't know if they'd be back. I thought maybe they'd just go south.
I was glad they didn't just go south. So
kind of where they were headed, and then they
Yeah.
turned right and ended up in Petenwell. Okay. So this is Kevin says, Derek, I'll look for you November 5th, and would love to link up with you in Texas at some time.
Yeah, that'd be cool for sure. And then he said, well, doing a big year, who verifies your count? So it's all on the honor system. So if you were just a bad person, you could totally lie and say you saw whatever amount of species. And they do count herd only too. And I think that's kind of like it's up to you if you want to do that. But when talking with Aryan, he was like he pretty much had to count herd only birds if he wanted a chance to break the record.
Yeah. Yeah, you're talking about Limpkin when we were down in Texas. We're placed just south of Houston. And we were, walk around birding, and all of a sudden this, bird comes popping out of the cypress, and we're like, that's a limpkin. What's that doing here? And you're literally almost in my backyard. Up here at Horicon, a couple months later. So
He followed us home.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was amazing that limpkin here at Horicon stuck within about 100 yards of where it was found for, I don't know, month and a half. And you watched it over period of time, and it's like, and he's coming up with these big snails. Like, I didn't know we had that big of snails there at Horicon.
Yeah, my guess is those are the Chinese mystery snails because those are pretty large. So I think they're also non-native. When I saw one in Milwaukee, it was pulling mussels out. Apparently they do eat mussels. I didn't see it actually eating one, but apparently they will. And Kevin said Asteriano's crazy was seeing a limpkin as well. Yeah, it's just that's another one that seems out of place, especially if like you've gone to Florida just to see that.
Any other questions, comments from the audience? Yes. Best time to go to Zach Zim?
Winter.
So I would say it kind of depends on what's being seen and what eruptions are happening. I would say usually January, February. That kind of gives everybody time to search out where the stuff is being seen too, because sometimes things will be in specific places. So if you go up there after a couple of weeks of winter have gone by, people will be like, yeah, there's a great gray that usually hangs out on the road in this area. So you get a little more intel if you wait a little bit in the year. But we have some friends that they'll kind of book a trip tentatively, and then based on if stuff being seen or not, they'll either go on it or cancel, or if the weather's going to be really cold, they'll cancel. So it kind of depends on if you're wanting to go just any time when the birds are good, or if you're wanting to go when the weather's not going to be super brutal. But I would say anytime, usually January, February is going to be fairly good.
We've gone up, I have a brother that has a cabin at about 60, 70 miles west of there, and we'll go up between Christmas and New Year's. And it's usually pretty tame, not too many people around. And we've found some of the birds, the Zach Zim specialties in his neck of the woods a little bit too. So we get to kind of know the local landscape. We found great grays, there in the Aiken County, which is a county or two west of Zach Zim. So, but that's, it was a good year for great grays. In the last year or so, it hasn't been, but.
Yeah, I feel like when we went, like we hit on everything we wanted to see, and I thought it would be like that all the time. But it is kind of like, on any given year, anything can show up or not show up.
Yeah, it's worth the trip to go just to see the evening grosbeaks.
Oh yeah, so there's a place called Mary Lou's.
Yes, feeders.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, apparently like something burned down there, but then she got a ton of donations to like rebuild it or something. So I think it's back up and running.
Yes.
I think she even got like a heated garage now.
Yeah, so she had a garage that she had her bird seed stored in, and she had bird feeders, these hopper feeders that were 8 and 10 feet long. And so just imagine filling those things, and she would get evening grosbeaks by the hundreds there, and she had just tons of it. So the garage ended up catching on fire and burning down. And I don't know, they had like $3,000 or $5,000 for a goal to help Mary Lou. I think she got over 10 to rebuild a garage, and then she built a lean-to on the garage for 4 birders to come watch, sit out and watch the basically evening grosbeaks. If anybody's going to have them, Mary Lou's going to have evening grosbeaks.
Yeah, those people are such gems that just like let people come to their house and have these nice setups and everything. Kevin asked if we'd gotten over to Governor Nelson for the Rufus hummingbird yet. I have not. I was in South Texas a couple months ago and we had like hummingbirds galore, Rufus everywhere. So it hasn't been the top of my list to go out and chase hummingbirds that I've got in other places, but might at some point go look for that one.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The Rufus, they always show up in the States somewhere. Generally, I mean, you can count on them one or two. Several years ago, 8 years ago, we had one here in Dodge County, and we were able to band it, and it went on its way. And then the next year, coming back, within the same week, that same hummingbird came back to the same feeders.
Was that the Hersman house?
Yes. Yep.
I
Yeah.
saw that one.
Oh,
Yeah.
you did? Yeah.
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 I saw that
So
one too.
yeah, so it was awesome. I don't know which is that the bird came back, or between 2 or 3 photographs, we were able to piece together the exact numbers off of the bands.
Yeah,
So-
that's some good work.
Yeah. So that was pretty amazing. So. Any other questions, comments from our crowd here?
Ryan, will you get back in a kayak?
I would gladly get back in a kayak. I had a great time.
It's awesome.
I'll kayak for anything now. That was my first time in a kayak, and I was so
Wow.
worried I was going to tip over and just dump my camera in the water, but everything was okay. So
I gave you
I
a
would
dry
gladly
bag,
go back
so
in.
you were good.
What'd you say?
That I gave you a dry bag, so you were
You
good.
did give me a dry bag, but I was like, something's going to go wrong. I'm going to take the camera. Well, I had it around my
Nathaniel
neck
had
the
some
whole time.
issues though, didn't he?
Nathaniel, yeah, our friend Nathaniel, he was sitting too far forward, so he just kept going around in circles, and we couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. We were like, "You paddled out here. How come you can't get back in?" So he eventually figured it out, though. But we thought we were gonna have to like tow him or just have him swim or something.
Oh, kayaking and paddling is one of my favorite way to birds. You're quiet. You go along streams. You're not on a designated trail per se. And then if I'm carrying a camera, I'll just back into a deadfall or something like that, and just let it happen. With the birds come to you, and
Yeah.
you'll see birds out on dead branches over water is one of the favorite ways to find them. And it's easier to photograph that way too, rather than trying to chase them all over.
Yeah, for us it's tough shooting in a kayak or on boat because we tend to do video, and it's so hard to keep it stable. Normally when you're in there, you're like, oh, I'm getting some good stuff, and you look back later, you're like, what was I doing when I shot this thing? It's just like all over the place.
Yeah, that's true. I remember we were in a canoe and we were shooting video of a bald eagle and a merlin up in the Minnesota boundary waters, just on separate things. But I was like, we got so much great footage of that merlin. I was like, I can use all of that. And I looked at it and it was like, well, that's shaky. Let's check out the next minute. Well, that's shaky. And I was like, wow, I can't use any of this.
Do they do any tours? Do they do any tours?
So the question was, do you guys do any tours?
We do. So we'll do, I think our most popular one is we do snowy owl tours in the winter. But like I did a fall migration tour. So we're kind of up for, if anyone wants to go do something, we'll, put something together for you.
It's not an organizing post, did you reach out to them and ask for something?
So the question was, comment, so they have to reach out to you. It's not something that you would post and say, hey, we're going out on something, or how would?
So right now, basically, if you just send us an email, that's how we've been setting it up. But we were talking about setting up trips and being like, hey, we're going to do this trip. You can sign up here. It costs this much, or, something like that. If there'd be enough interest in it, we'd definitely definitely be a possibility.
Okay, we will pass along that information. With that, I want to thank you guys again. Entertaining, informational. I'm smarter again, So, consider yourselves a success, whether it's, you know, in YouTube numbers or just the way you can explain things to anybody, you know. Consider that a gift, and way to go. Thumbs up. Glad to have
Thanks.
you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we really
appreciate
appreciate you guys having us.
Keep doing it.
We shall. No plan
Yeah,
on slowing
yeah,
down
exactly.
anytime soon.
All right, guys. Thanks much.
Thank you.
Yep. Have a good one, guys.
Later.